Welcome to Moz Garage with Smokey.
Crick.
And Kev.
And today's topic, we're going to be talking about roles and responsibilities. And what I want to know a little bit more about are how do responsibilities dictate roles?
How much choice do we have over the roles that we are chosen to be responsible for?
And what should you put on them? Like honey, jam, butter, or some combination of the two? On this episode, we're going to find out.
Wait. Butter, jam.
You guys ever do an episode on rules?
What kind of roles?
What?
What kind of roles are you thinking?
Dinner rolls, Kaiser rolls, like. Well, what kind of roles are you guys talking about then?
I was thinking more like the rules and like the responsibilities of roles, like duties that you have to do.
Oh,
The life variety.
Okay. Well, then I can say my question would be, what are you if you don't have any of those roles? Who are you without a role?
So my mindset behind a role is a responsibility. I believe that when you are in a role, you have certain responsibilities, and those certain responsibilities are your duties. That's what you need to do. So when you're in a supervisor role, when you're in a entry level role, when you're in a chief executive role, you have specific responsibilities, stuff that's detailed, stuff that's outlined to you so that you know how to handle that role and what you need to do to handle that responsibility.
Who dictates what roles go, what responsibilities pair up with those roles?
And that's the
what
question.
Do you do?
I guess it really.
What do you do when those roles aren't defined or those responsibilities aren't defined either?
I would hope, and I guess that's really the question. Like if if you're in a position and the responsibilities are never really outlined to you, who does dictate your role and who does dictate what you do? If they're never outlined to you, if they're never explained to you, then it's kind of just your perception of what you need to do with that of that role. So it's kind of like you dictate how you handle that role. But then if you don't dictate the role properly, as opposed like the way that it would have been dictated as like someone that actually dictates or someone that controls or someone that actually has input on how you handle like what the role is that you have agreed to, then it's not on the person to basically figure these things out for themselves. They're not training themselves. They're not setting themselves up for success or failure. They're leveraging the assistance given to them to be at least set up for success. And then it's up to them to handle it to actually be successful.
That's where I think it's a balance for roles that are given to you and roles that you choose to take on. Because there are certain roles that are just kind of dropped in your lap, and it's one thing if it's your actions that cause that role, like, you impregnate someone and you become a father. That's a role that your actions cause. But, sometimes roles are just put on us by people because they see something in us or they see potential and they see these different things in us. And that's when it can become unfair because they're asking something of you that, like you said, you either don't fully understand the full role and its responsibilities, or it just hasn't been clarified to you.
And the reasoning behind it is usually the most unclear in those situations. Like, oh, you're the youngest.
Right. That's a good idea. That's a good point. Cause that's the same thing with being tall. That's a role. If you're the tall person
oh my gosh,
in the group, you're getting everything from the top shelf. You're doing all the tall stuff.
Yep.
Like that's you know what I mean? And it's like, that's a role that you didn't ask for. You didn't pick to be tall. You didn't wear tall shoes. You're just tall. So you're going to do all the tall stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And it comes to a point where you just expect it.
I guess it is fair to say you are born into some roles in that sense then, aren't you?
Yeah.
When you have aspects to your body. Well, at the same time though, I guess you have to think about like when a baby is born, like, is it just expected or like, is it just like been decided? Like this baby has been born and this baby's going to grow to be like 7 feet. This baby's going to grow to be like 5 feet 7 inches. This baby's going to grow to be 6'1" or 2 inches.
They can do that with DNA mapping now.
I can believe that in terms of like DNA mapping, that they could predict something to a degree, but at the same time you have to think about like what affects that baby in terms of the culture that it was brought up in. Like,
that's true.
and
Like,
especially
how far
if
can you predict the science, and what happens as that baby's growing that can change that already pre-made decision, right? Like,
right,
I broke
like,
my leg and it's an inch and a half longer than the other, because when you break something, your body feeds it nutrients to make it longer. So
exactly.
your
Had you not
atmosphere can
broken
do
it,
that.
and another thing I'm more thinking about, I think about like parents of today, like not all of them, but what some of them could be doing, what some of them already have been doing in terms of their children, grooming them to be the future athletes of tomorrow. And I think it came out recently that DK Metcalf, wide receiver for the Seattle Seahawks, he said that at a very early age, he was basically like taught by his dad to lift heavy weights. And he had just it was ingrained in his brain to do that at such a young age that he continued to do that through his childhood years, through growing up. And that's how, when he went to college and now he's playing in the NFL, and he's extremely strong. Like, he's a very strong person, and he's very toned. Like, obviously he's taken on like the NFL regiment per se, but and then I know that there's another child that is under the age of, I think this was probably like a handful of years ago. I hope he's under the age of 10 still. He might be 10 or 11, but this kid was basically like, he looked like Barry Sanders at the age of 6, where out on the football field for like little league per se, and he's just juking out everyone. He's like, it was for like flag football, now that I remember it, and like you could not get this kid's flag. Like, he was so elusive, he knew exactly how to get around you. Like, no matter what, you put the ball in his hands, he was scoring. There was nothing that could stop him, and he was like younger than the age of 10. So I also think about like some of these athletes and some of their children, and how they groom them to essentially kind of be that next person that's going to be like handling the family name per se, and how they want them to be able to have the same abilities.
Is that fair to put on them? You know what I mean? Like,
that's the question.
Because it's like, great, you gave them a life, because that's what your parents trying to do. They're trying to give you skills so that you can be a productive member of society and have a living. But it's, what if he trained them because he's like, either he wanted to be a professional athlete, which happens all the time, where it's like high school athletes who didn't do anything with it, and then they force their kids into these athletic programs. And it's like, well, what if he's great at math and space and science, and because he was taught, you have to focus all your energy into this one spot, because this is what I'm telling you is valuable. And that's where
listening to them is huge.
Listening to who? Oh, the child.
Listening to the child, find out what they enjoy.
Right.
Because if you really want them to find the things that they'll really grow in, you got to find the things that they get joy out of.
That's where I feel
and even if it's not something you agree on, you can spin it a certain way. You can show a different avenue of something.
That's where you have to, as you get older, I've talked to a lot of people, and they say kind of the same, is you kind of have to deprogram yourself. You have to deprogram yourself from all these different cues and things that you were taught that you have to kind of fall in line with, or things that you have to do, but they don't help you in any way. They're almost more of a hindrance now, because people taught them for the application that they thought that you would be doing. And it's like, you're living a life that they could never have predicted. So you have to, unlearn all these things and teach yourself the new roles that you've actually accepted. Right.
Updates.
Right. Because it's not fair. Like, the reason why it's so important to be in a role that you find important is because the responsibilities that come along with it. Like, when you accept a role,
absolutely,
or get put into a role, those responsibilities that go along with it are the whole point of the role. You know what I mean? Like, people look to you. It's like, if you're dressed like a cop, I'm going to expect cop things from you. You know what I mean? Like, if you're dressed like a judge, I'm going to expect judge things from you. And it's like, the role you say is like, I expect a certain bit of responsibility from you for that. And if you can't do that, you should never accept that role in the first place. Like, that's where I keep getting asked to like get into management again. And I'm trying to do so many other things in my personal life where I couldn't give that company the time and energy that it takes to be a manager. So I'm not going to do it. It's not fair to myself, and it's not fair to the company. It's not fair to the employees. Like, you have to understand the responsibilities of the role you're going to take on before you ever take it on.
I agree with that 100%. And especially nowadays, you see so many people that they talk about like how they're unhappy with their job. They're unhappy with like where they've ended up in terms of like decisions that they've made and like where their employment history has essentially landed them per se. At the end of the day, it's all choices that they've made. It's up to them on how they learn and how they adapt to the future choices that they're going to be making. And if you're in a role that you are truly unhappy and you always have that ability to be looking for something else, like if something truly makes you unhappy, there are other things out there that you can be happy. You might go through a period of time where you're not going to be as sound per se in terms of a foundation, because when you're in a role for a consistent period of time, you have a consistent foundation. And then I think that's essentially like whenever I'd be talking to my mom about like me switching jobs, like it didn't work out here, but I'm going to be going into here. It didn't work out here. I'm going to be looking at this. I'm going to be looking at that. Her advice every time is don't quit a position until you have a new one lined up. So that way you're not leaving yourself without a foundation. So that way you have a consistency. It's unfortunate these days, not every time the employee has the option to dictate whether or not they stay at a company or not, because a company will just randomly get rid of them. Something will happen. They're downsizing, they're downgrading, whatever it is, something that's completely out of that employee's control. So, and that's something that I've learned, especially going through these years. Like, I need to be a little bit more diligent. I need to be a little bit more prepared. Relatively speaking, I could go into my job yesterday and they could just say it didn't work out. Like, we thought the contract was going to stick, but the contract didn't stick. And that's essentially what happened at my previous place, and what happened at the previous place before that. Especially seeing it in this consistency, it makes me more definitely want to have a little bit more control.
If there's anything that we've been taught over our lifespan, it's how much a company owes us as employees. You know, how much they'll stick by us if they have to pick between themselves or the employees. They'll cut us loose to save themselves, because that's how business works.
Realistically, there's no such thing as a guarantee. There used to be there used to be a thought that things could be a shoo-in, a guaranteed position to a level of having support. That's how you get that guarantee. So it's like, unless you get in with the boss's daughter, there's not much of a guarantee. Well, even if you get in with the boss's daughter, you're probably out of there 7 out of 10 times.
That's where some of the issue comes in though too, because it's like, what if you want to change fields? Like, for instance, like what you honed your skills in the field that you're in for so long. And like your mom said, you know, that's what everybody says. You need to set up a second job because you have to pay bills and everything.
Mm-hmm. But you're always going to have you have responsibilities and you have to adhere to them.
But what if you've been told your whole life that you should be focusing on these things, but you're like, I want to try something completely different, something you're not good at because you have barely any experience in it. You've never really done before, but in some way it brings you joy, but your expertise is in a complete different area. There's a longer learning curve than just being able to jump right into that job. You have to sometimes make no money doing it for a while before you ever get a chance to do it as a profession or do it as like your role in society.
Which that's how it starts anyway, right? You do it because you enjoy it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And especially, I mean, think about starting out at like the age of 16. A lot of the people that either you start in fast food or you start in retail, because those are the jobs that you, or you're in like multimedia entertainment, like working at like 15 years old at like a water park, or working for a family business, which I was just, my coworkers that like, but like both my coworkers, even my new coworker, they've been in the restaurant business since they were like 12 years old. They were busboys at 12 years old. I'm thinking to myself, like, we never had those opportunities. Like, there wasn't a lot of business owners in our area. Like, there were businesses, so of course there's business owners, but there wasn't a lot of family owned businesses.
Right.
There were family owned businesses. You knew the ones that were, and you could see like how they were able to, but of course, like labor laws and stuff. But I mean, at the end of the day, different places are different places are different places. I know that and especially like read like the one, like one of the books that I'm reading about, like their family business was a roller skating rink where they had like an adult hangout spot on top. So like you had like the roller rink on the bottom where like the kids hung out and stuff, and then like the adults and like the teenagers and stuff went up. There was like a video arcade and like a lounge and stuff on like the top level, but it was all family owned. So the main character of the book is this he's like 12 years old and he's running this cash register, and he's like in this room full of these like gases and stuff from like spraying down the roller skates and stuff. And that work ethic, my coworkers work ethic, the opportunity of people that can start out at that young age, you wonder if they get burned out at a point or if it's burned into them at an early point that it's not possible to get burned out.
That's true.
That's a taught characteristic, right?
Right.
Giving up, being allowed to give up, or not being allowed. Yeah.
Because I also think about like, what if you were in a family that you have the family business that you just don't want any part of?
Well, that's the thing is like, so family business like that, you are forcing them to be into it. But if there's a family business or like a family restaurant that's been going for the last 50, 100 years, the only thing that keeps it consistent is staying in the family. Mm-hmm. As soon as those businesses fall out of the family, they go to crap. They lose their image and their vision and all this value because their parent has taught them that for the last 20 years. Hey, this is how the store is ran. This is how we do things. You're going to be me in 20 years. You know what I mean? And like, somewhat it's not fair, but you wouldn't have that consistency over centuries if you didn't do that.
That's one of my boss for the pizzeria that I work at. That's his biggest fear with selling the business right now, is that he doesn't want to sell it to just anyone, because he wants to sell it to someone that's going to continue the family tradition, continue the the brick oven process and all the ingredients and everything that have been done for the last 60 plus years that this business has been going. And like something that like, even like I've had thoughts of like what someone could do. Someone could come in, someone could completely demolish the place. As long as you have that recipe, you come back with like a brand new building, brand new kitchen. You still utilize brick ovens. You get 4 more. And then you have dining, you have outdoor patio. I mean, like in terms of the property and what the potential, I like that is when you're a family business that's been established, it's the people, but it's also the food. The quality of the food is definitely a factor. And if you have a successful recipe, the recipe is what you will be able to is what you'll be able to use to keep yourself going.
So he's holding himself responsible for the role that his restaurant holds in society. On even a grander scale, he's taking responsibility for that and wants to ensure that role for the next generations.
Absolutely, because he learned this recipe from his family, and his family developed this recipe through like the research or whatever that they brought over from wherever they like immigrated from. If they immigrate, like wherever they got this recipe from, this has been the family recipe for 60 plus years. And he definitely holds that. He feels the weight of that responsibility. And that's part of the reason why he hasn't sold yet, because he's not just looking to sell. He's looking to sell to give it a future.
So that was a role that was put on him, like that he didn't even ask for. It was passed down from his family. Hey, you need to keep this recipe alive. You need to honor it. And like, so now he's honor bound from that.
He definitely feels like it. But at the same time, I mean, he's a very knowledgeable person in terms of like, because he's done this for so long. I mean, he knows literally everything about the business. There's maybe some pieces where, because he's not there 100% of the time, but like in terms of like owning and knowing how that business works, he knows how that business works. His
Fountain of carnal
downfall
knowledge.
is the fact that he does not utilize a lot of the new technology 100% as much as he could. Like, we have a Facebook page, but we don't utilize it as much as we could. We definitely can. We just don't for whatever reason. Maybe that's something that we could be doing in the future. I know that it's something that we have talked about, but I mean, right now we have our menu online, and we're going to be in the process of like printing new menus, because before, you ordered a pizza from this place and it came with a menu taped to the box. Like, we gave a menu every single time that we would order from this place, we always got a menu on the box. That's how we always had a menu in the house. We haven't been doing that through COVID, right? Because we haven't been getting the menus printed. So, but at the same time, we tell people that our menu is online. We do have a significant amount of older clientele. A lot of them do know at least how to pull up websites. So they know how to go to Google, type in our pizzeria, and pull up the menu, which is good. And then we have the younger clientele that they know it 100%, but at the same time, it depends on, are they looking for quality or are they looking for quantity? And if they're looking for quantity, they're going to go with Little Caesars. Little Caesars, $5 hot and ready, boom, bam, bam. And that's kind of, I was having this conversation at my work, because one of my supervisors absolutely loves pizza. So when I told her that I worked at a pizzeria, she's like, "Oh, which pizzeria? I got to know." And the conversation got interrupted by like, there was like other conversations that like happened, and it just kind of got lost in the wayside or whatever. But we were talking about even at work, like you know what the employer, how the employer feels about the employee when they don't just opt for the cheap pizza. Like, when they actually give when they actually like give decent money for like the good quality and like the fresher ingredients. Granted, like I have nothing bad to say about Little Caesars. I eat Little Caesars avidly, much less now that I've worked at a pizzeria and I understand the difference, but I will still eat Little Caesars from time to time. Like, I'm one that loves pizza, and I'm going to eat pizza. The only pizza that I am just not particular on, I just don't eat it as often, but I'll still eat it because I enjoy pizza, and I'm going to eat pizza as long as I can.
It's always nice to get that reassurance every once in a while. Yep, still not a fan.
Yeah, no kid. Especially when I eat these. Oh man, I don't know what it is about some of these places. Like, I've given them so many opportunities, so many tries, and it's just like, still just not. And it's probably because I've had over here, there's so many different kinds, so many different like local, commercial, just like family owned, whatever.
Everybody's the best, right? And everybody's the best.
I wouldn't necessarily everyone doesn't, but I wouldn't say everyone's the best. Everyone knows what they're doing.
In a world where pizza is the currency, several pizzeria families fight for supreme control.
Like, they know how they've been doing it for as long as they've, like, it's not
their role in the
that
community.
makes sense.
Like, but believe me, like where I work, because we've received like national like recognition for best gourmet pizza, like way back in the whatever years, like, because we've received that recognition, like, we really hold ourselves like we have really good pizza. And I mean, like, I'm a little biased, but at the same time, like, I've had a lot in the area, and we really do have some of the best pizza. Just in term, it comes down to the recipe, but it also comes down to the consistency and how we hold, like, what we do to hold that consistency, like the process and the system and everything that we follow.
Being responsible.
I feel like between everything that was
the responsibilities, absolutely.
That's what keeps it consistent.
Like the business has stayed alive because you have certain roles. You have the roles of the front, you have the roles of the back, And as long as those people are holding those roles properly, that business is going to thrive. And that's what we've been able to do.
That's where I feel like you do have to lock in those roles for your employees. You have to tell them, like, I need this from you and this from you and this from you. But I feel in that you can't lay it all on. You have to have, how I like to say, is specialization.
Mm-hmm.
You have, everybody has their role. That's what, you know, you're good at. You've kind of found your place in, but you're not always going to be there. So in a good business or in a functioning business that I've seen is everybody has to be able to do everything. Like, you have your role, the thing that's your first priority. But if you need to clean dishes, you need to clean dishes. If you need to go answer the phones, you need to go answer the phones. Like, because the fact of it is that other person's not always going to be there. So sometimes your roles will change. Sometimes you'll take on extra roles. You know what I mean? Like, in a good business, you need to be able to know how to do every role. And what you see a lot is where people on the higher up won't teach people their roles for the simple fact they don't want their roles taken away from them. And you stifle yourself, because when you're sick or you're not gone, no one else can do your role, and your business fails. Yeah, they need you, but your business is going to suffer for it.
Mm-hmm. And depending on the business, like, it could be a role that, because you did not hold that responsibility was not held. And as a prime example, I'm the weekend driver for the business. If I call in, at the current point, we don't have like a reserve driver, and none of them at the restaurant take the responsibility on themselves to be the driver, because they can't.
The backup.
If they were to, exactly, it would take one person away from the operation, where they already need the people to do the operation for at least the people that are coming into the restaurant, the people that are calling in asking for us to come to them. Like, it's unfortunate, we have to say, unfortunately, we don't have a delivery driver for today. Our delivery driver had to call in sick, or whatever they say, if they just like keep it at what it is. So, and it's really made me feel terrible, because now it's like, I've been there under not perfect circumstances, and I've been there under just feeling great under like almost perfect circumstances, and like made a lot of money, made not a lot of money, had a lot of deliveries, had not very many deliveries. But at the same time,
you've lived a life of ups and downs.
It is what I have It's what I've accepted. So, and that's where I'm just really trying to be a little bit more diligent to myself. Like, I have to have a little bit more control on the days that are going into those shifts, so that I can be the best person that I can be for that, so that I can help that business as much as I can.
That's all we can do as employees, as long as we're treated the same in return, right?
And I think that definitely dictates part of it. Like, because of the people that work there and how close we have become over this short period of time, like, it really does feel like working with a family. Like, and you definitely feel like you have that support, and it, to a degree, does not feel like work when I'm there. And I think that's why I don't have as much of an issue like doing whatever I can for this place, because they're not asking me to do stuff that's like outrageously outside of my boundaries.
Well, and they've also made you feel responsible. If they're your family, you're going to do everything in your power to make sure your family doesn't struggle.
Absolutely.
So making you feel responsible for the place you work about. There's so many places that don't make you feel responsible for where you work. You know what I mean? They make you just feel like a peon and someone who doesn't have any investment. But the fact that they make you feel like family, that's
not
huge.
Much better.
What do you mean?
You know, it may sound fun to not have any responsibilities, but I don't know. I get bored. Right. It shows me
you need
I'm
direction.
Replaceable.
Absolutely, man.
Yes. And give me direction.
And I know
something to do.
Give me a role.
and Crick, like,
yes.
I know like and like that's like centered around like kind of like what you were wondering. Like, what if someone just doesn't know what they're doing? Like, what if someone doesn't know like what they're expected, what they should be doing?
My question is that, and even a little bit more, because it's like, what are you when all those roles are stripped away? Roles are given to you by society for things that they need from you. We need someone to take care of this. We need someone to take care of these people. We need someone to do this. It's like, what role do you have when you're at home? What role do you have when you're on a walk in the middle of the woods and nobody needs you and your phone's away? What role are you then?
Do you have like an invisible backpack for all these hats to put on?
Right.
Switching from this to this. Do you have?
I talk to my
doubled
nieces, then
hats,
I talk to my
triple
mom,
hats?
then I talk to the employees at my work, because it's like, exactly, it's a different hat I'm going to put on as camouflage. Not that I'm hiding who I am. It's a different version of myself.
It's like putting in a certain CD.
Right.
Okay, mind, you have to work this way. Okay, mind, you have to work this way.
Watch your swear words. Talk a little more professional. You know what I mean? Like,
yes.
like there's different
And
atmospheres.
It's not being fake. It's just going about it the right way. There's a right way to handle different situations.
Right. I'm not going
Right.
to talk to my
There are
friends
different
professional.
ways.
They're going to be like, dude, why are you being so proper and using such big words?
Exactly.
Just
And
talk
at
to
the
us.
same point, you're not going to talk to your employees like they're like your 5-year-old nieces or something,
Right. Right. That's
As
not fair to
funny
them.
as that would be, that might only last for a little bit. Like if
Mhm.
you're just looking at you're like hey,
It might end with you in the loony bin.
sweetie, let me give you some advice on what you could be doing, or hey honey, let me get your advice on what I could be doing with
You
this.
probably got another 50 years before you can get away with that.
Hey pumpkin, hey little dinosaur. Hey
I've
there,
had,
hey there,
though-
hey there, little dolphin.
The worst part is that happens all the time in businesses where people don't understand your value and talk to you like belittle like that, where it's just like, okay, so what you're going to do here is this, and sharpen the pencil and write on the paper. And it's like,
I think I love so
Don't you
I'm
talk
ki-
to me. Like,
I've been kind of noticing this, like going through my training and going through trainings just in general at like other companies, how they really have to try to not necessarily dumb things down, but they have to simplify. And it has to be simple enough that like someone that has like a certain level of education would be able to understand. And then like, I guess like in certain cases, I guess because I am like my education history, I do have my undergraduate, and then some people may not have their undergraduate and some people may not have their GED. And then some people may not have even anything after that. But in terms of being able to do like a job that all you need to do is learn the process, and then you can do that role. You can follow those
you
responsibilities.
could break anything down into that
And that's
process,
why a lot
though,
of these
couldn't you?
places, they have to at least start their work operations as like, make it easy enough for a 5-year-old that they can do this. And then we own the minimum age that we're going to employ someone to do this job is going to be anywhere from like 18 to 21, depending.
so that's how manuals are written. How many times do you read the manual?
Oh, absolutely. And
Do you read the
then-
manual?
And you think about that meme where like instructions unclear, got my dick stuck in the ceiling fan.
Right. If they make it too simple, I'm blowing over it. I'm not, if it's so just like, okay, I get the point, I'm just going to
Yeah,
go
but
do
at the
it.
same time, if they give you a novel,
Right.
you're not
And
going to
that's
sit
where
there
it's-
and read the novel either.
But if you give me pictures, or if you give me a Capacha, or what, not Capacha, what are the things where you like take a picture and it sends me to a video of how to do
A
it?
caption. Yes.
I forgot what
Yes.
it's
Is it?
called.
I
A
don't think
QR
it's a-
code.
A
QR code.
link.
A QR
Sure.
code.
code.
Yeah.
Yes.
QR. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. QR
So
code.
if they give me a QR code that sends me to a tutorial video, for me, a visual learner, I'll watch your tutorial video, but I'm not reading your
Why
basic
not? You're the
novel
ones who made it.
and your thick novel. But if you can, you know what I mean? It's like, just because you're making it simple for
I've
that
read the
certain
basic.
demographic, it can get past other people too.
I've read the basic novels. They don't give you much information.
No, you're
The
almost
pictures,
worse off.
even
You're
just
almost
strictly
worse off.
pictures. Yeah. Yeah.
Like, it's like, wait, you didn't even give me that basic.
You end up
black and
more
white shape.
confused.
Yeah, like,
I didn't even know that part was on this thing.
right.
Where'd you find that?
Or it's 3 different projects in the same manual, and you have to figure out which one's
Yes.
yours out of it, and it's just like, yeah. This one girl that she came in recently to the dispensary, I found she's what really sparked this to me about roles and kind of the things that you got to set into, because she has been playing violin since she was 5 years old. She's 22, 23 years old. She's a violin instructor. at 22, 23 years old because she's been playing for 18 years.
Makes sense.
She wants to do something different. She's like, all I know is violin. I'm good at it and I love it and I enjoy it, but all I've ever done is violin. And you could tell that it was like this inner battle with her, you know, and I was like, I was super excited for her. I was like, that's courageous as hell. Something that you've mastered. People like will pay a lot of money for you to do, but you're like, do I really love this? Is this my all be all? Like, that's a huge question to ask yourself when you're already so good at one thing. And it's like,
it is.
you really have to assess the roles that we take on even further down the road. Even if it's like a role you took on now, in 3 years, you need to readdress that role. And it's like, does that still, you know, associate with who I am?
And I think to a degree, she's spent all this time mastering this art that she's now asking herself, what do I do next? Like, do I do I can do this for the rest of my life, and I can do this very easily for the rest of my life. She's mastered it. So what is she going to do now that's actually going to pose a challenge to her? And that's where it's such a scary thing to think about, because you've had your focus on this one thing. Like, I kind of think about that at times as well, and think about like back when I was like bowling for as long as I was. Like, if I would have stayed to bowling, if I would have bowled in college, if I would have like, I was on the bowling team in high school, if I would have kept it through college, how things would be different. If I'd be out there bowling almost every day, like actually aspiring and trying to be a professional bowler.
What's different from that than just go and doing that? Why don't you go become a professional bowler now?
I just don't feel like paying the money every day. You have to pay the money to bowl.
So there you go. The
so
excuse back then was you didn't have the money to pay for it.
Bowl for free per se, or bowl at a discount, it's not 100% feasible. But what me personally, because I've been doing it for so long, and I've noticed this, like, granted, the date that I went on not too long ago, I mean, when you learn that I've been bowling since I was 8 years old, I think that should tell you that I'm not going to be a terrible bowler. So, but
you didn't let her win, did you?
How can you, when she's throwing gutter balls every other one?
So you play left-handed.
Like,
You actually,
I did, but I still got like 7+ pins. I legitimately did like 5 frames in a row left-handed, and like still I got like 1 and 7 and 1, and like it just.
Did you teach her what to do better?
Yes, and she didn't do anything.
Oh, well then you can't help her. She don't want.
That's what I'm saying. It's like,
I'm sorry.
It's like I don't want to say anything bad about her, but like
at that point she didn't want to learn.
Right.
Exactly. Like, and I
or
get
you were
it.
the perfect
like,
teacher, maybe.
That could have been it as well. Even though I feel like, because I've done it for so long.
Not the perfect teacher for her is what I'm saying. Not that you're not a good teacher, that you're not the perfect teacher for her.
And that could and she might not have necessarily like agreed to go on this date to be taught something, you know?
True.
So that's where I just thought of it as like, it's not the right time and place. So I just started like messing around, like more granny shots, more like stuff that like I don't care. Like,
so you stepped out of your role. You stepped out of your role as this professional good bowler, kind of a sense.
And I stepped out of this, like,
to encompass somebody else,
out of this like focused bowler into like a doesn't really care per se bowler, except for I wasn't like disrespectful. Like, I wasn't, because
you're trying to be
a bunch of shit, you know.
Because you weren't a bowler at that point.
You're having a good time.
You were a partner.
Yes.
You were a friend. You were a companion at that point. You weren't a bowler.
Yes.
Your roles had changed. Because if you were a bowler and you were versing somebody and they were good, your competitive side would have kicked in, and you would have tried to beat their ass at it. You know what I mean? So it's
something
like,
to that degree. Yeah.
Roles aren't. That brings up a good point. That roles aren't so sedimentary. They're not so like. You're not stuck in the roles that you're given, even in the same day. Like, we change who we are consistently.
You don't have to be.
It goes back to that. You can take off the hats. You don't have to wear the hat all the time.
Some
because
people
at the end of the day, you control your destiny. You control the choices that you make. If you are in a role that you're unhappy with, learn on how to not be.
Find what makes you happy.
Like learn what you can do to capitalize on the role that you're in. And if it's like, and especially in terms of like fatherhood, like To each their own. I had a different mindset years ago. I have a different mindset now. But like someone that like impregnates a girl by accident and then runs at the responsibility, as opposed to someone that embraces the responsibility. To each their own. Sometimes the timing is not right. Sometimes the situation's not right. To each their own. Reasons are reasons. But if you're one that embraces the responsibility, you have to understand the responsibility that you are embracing, and you can't blame that responsibility for your unhappiness because it's a choice that you consciously made.
Correct.
Because only your choices affect you. Even somebody else's actions, the way you choose to respond to those actions is your choice, right?
That's being aware of the response.
I was going to say more, your choices affect more than just you.
Correct.
Yes.
That's where you have to, people can pass it off as they don't know the responsibilities of a role. But if you have sex, there is a chance that you will get somebody pregnant, and you're taking that, risk by having sex. So you've already signed that contract, where if you have a kid, you've built on those responsibilities, and you can't just say, "Oh, I didn't want." And no, you had sex. Like you've set the path in motion.
The condom broke. She wasn't on the pill. Like reasons are reasons. Excuses are excuses. Like things are legitimate. Things are illegitimate.
You had sex for pleasure, and now you have a kid.
You guys want to quote off? I've got a Greg special.
But then
the
at
fucking
the end,
you get for the fucking you got.
I mean, it could be going whatever way, but abortion is a thing. It is an option. The morning after pill is an option. There are options. There are alternatives. Like back in the traditional way, or the traditional days where you got pregnant and you didn't have all of these options. And if you were in a Catholic family per se, abortion was not an option. That's where it was more of that forced role, where I agreed to this consent and these are the results, and I fully accept what these results are.
But there's a spectrum to that, because that's just on the other side of some woman who has unprotected sex, or couple who has unprotected sex all the time, and then just gets abortions as their means of contraceptive.
It goes both ways, right? Yeah. What do you think was going to happen when you had sex?
It's like, what's your extreme? Exactly. You just can't like diss the responsibilities because you said you didn't know what they were. You know what I mean? Like there's the role that you have to set, and speaking of fathers too, like that's something that I feel we've changed in our see change in our lifetimes, the role of what a father is. And that's, I think, something that, be the change you wish to see in the world. Like, I think you can do that with the roles that you're in too. Just because you don't like the role that you're in doesn't always mean you need to change it or get out of it. You can set a standard yourself for what other people have to be responsible for in that role. So it's like, and for fathers, like fathers were the breadwinner. You go home, you go to work, you make the money, you come home, you do your thing, you pass out, go to work. They weren't really part of the family, especially more in the 50s and 60s and stuff like that. But the role of what a father is and the role of what a father is in society has changed because we've changed it. We've changed what we say we need from a father, and we've changed what like the fathers do, to set that role.
And it's because you have examples of the world's greatest fathers and the world's worst fathers, like fathers that completely manipulated their children, or fathers that didn't acknowledge their children's existence because they resented their children. And then the complete opposite spectrum, where this father was fully invested in their child, fully invested in their well-being, fully invested in them being the best that they can be because they saw them as an extension as themselves.
Right. And sometimes too much, where they pamper them and treat them like they're this above and beyond, where they have no humbleness.
And then
they treated them too much like they're themselves.
That's the line. That's the line that I feel like, and especially with today's day and age and all the opportunity that is available at our fingertips, that our children will soon have at their fingertips as well, that we have to teach them how to handle these responsibilities. The sooner that we're able to teach them like what responsibility is, then we can help them to understand how it affects them and how it affects the decisions that they make moving forward. So you're not necessarily pampering your child, but you're more guiding, and you're more being that. You're not necessarily like almost not even necessarily as far as guiding, but you're more just, you're that force behind your child. Like, you're giving them the resources and you're allowing them to learn what they need to do and how these resources work.
Right.
You're hedging the odds in their favor for success.
Well, you
A
can't
little
even
bit.
you can't fully be their resources. Though,
You're doing
too,
what
'cause
you can.
teach. You have to teach them how to seek out their own resources too. So I get what you're saying. It is guidance, and there's. I'm trying to think of, like you're saying. There's a better word for it altogether, because it is
Like,
too, you're not just their supplier. That you have to teach them how to supply themselves.
You're their mentor.
Like,
right?
yes,
But you don't want them to be
almost
just
to a
like you, because
level.
you're not perfect. You fucked up. You don't want them to live your life. You know what I mean? So you don't want to mentor them and to get them to do the same thing. You just want to teach them some of the
And
lessons.
that's where I think, going back to what we was saying, where you've got the two different dynamics of parenting, but I think you also get different outcomes from that same style of parenting. Like, you know, there are a ton of, God forbid, abusive parents in the world, and depending on other situations, you know, some of the best and brightest people have come out of situations like that, because that's what they had to do to get away from it.
Even
Like,
siblings.
that was their way to get rid of it. Yeah.
Two different
Siblings
siblings. One could end
especially.
up great and, like you said, you know, push above and beyond because they don't want anything to do with that. And the other one could see that and fall directly in line and be like, oh, this is how I interact with the world, and emulate exactly what they saw. So yeah, that's very true. You know, it's what you do with the information at hand. And that's always curious, because like, where do you learn that? If, like, you know, where do you learn how to process that information?
And
learn that
it's
from
similar to
experience.
it's similar to a meme I saw online the other day on one of the success pages that I follow on Instagram, that it was instead of giving your child all of the things that you never had, teach them all of the information that you were never taught.
I like that a
The
lot.
things you say, man, I wish I would have known this when I was
really
younger.
spoke to me. I was like, that's how you truly are invested in your child's well-being, by teaching them the things that you wish you were taught when you were their age, or even just teaching them the things that's kind of, it goes back to, if you introduce it to them earlier on, then they know how to handle it later, as opposed to teaching it to them later on to where they won't know how to handle it because they won't have as much experience.
Right. It goes
But
to
then
like
there is
you
that
teach them
thin
that
line
lesson.
of how early and how much responsibility you teach to these, because these children are still children. I mean, you can't just overload your child with all these responsibilities and now they no longer get to enjoy their own childhood. Like don't get me wrong,
They're sponges.
a child still needs a childhood. But you can have little seeds that you plant in that childhood, that those trees really grow as they grow.
Right. That's exactly where it is. It's teaching them. Planting the seed, I think, is even almost a better word than teaching, because you're giving them the opportunity. You're setting up the situation so they can learn the lesson. You know what I mean? You're not telling them, hey, if you plus A plus B, you get C. You're like, here's a project. You know, you give them a situation where they can get frustrated or learn the lesson in a one-to-one point, and then you talk them through it. Oh, how did it make you feel when that happened? How did it make you feel when that? Because it's like, you can also teach people that the world is a dangerous and scary place. You know what I mean? You can teach them, hey, the world's a dangerous and scary place. You should be one of the better people to make it a better place. Or the world's a scary and dangerous place. You better watch your back, and you better be, and like, you know, be defensive and be one of those people so that you can get along in the world. And so you can teach, it's the same lesson, but what view are you teaching of it? You know what I mean? So that's where you got to be careful to show them the lesson, but not tell them how to live it.
Can't give such biased opinions.
Right.
Absolutely. And that's where it really comes, it's a thin line, because like you said, Kev, kids are sponges. They are absorbing everything that is happening around them, and especially things that they know. Like there's going to be things that they see that they may have like subconsciously ask about later on if they think about it, but things that they know what are happening, they're really paying attention, especially when your children are paying attention to like what you're doing in terms of your work, and then you're asking yourself like, what if I do this? And they're like, no, you told yourself you shouldn't do this. And you're like, man, you are 100%
away
right.
from me.
Yeah,
Right.
you are 100%. You are 100% right. I can't.
I
be
didn't
mad at
ask
you,
you.
but I want to be mad at you because you're not giving me you're not letting me do what I want to do.
That's where you have to be receptive that you can learn just as much as you teach them. You know what I mean? Like
It's huge.
them learning that lesson is watching yourself learn the lesson. It's like when we watch ourselves draw over again. You know what I mean? It's like you just think about the drawing after the fact and what you came up with. You don't think about your process, but when you see a mini me of yourself go through the process of you in anger or you in frustration or you in creativity, you're like, whoa, that's a whole thing. You know what I mean? Like it's a different perspective.
Like growing up, my dad was never scared to show his frustration with things that frustrated him. And I've learned other ways that I've had other friends that have talked about how their dad would show frustration or not show frustration, and even reading books on like what they say on how like a level of frustration should be shown and a level should not. Like you don't want to explode in front of your children because you don't want your children to see you in that light per se, because then they've seen what someone looks like in that light and then what they would look like in that light. I mean, obviously
how to react.
Emotions are emotions, and I mean anger can
It shows
grow and sadness can grow.
Kids literally know nothing, right? So that's them seeing that. That's okay. So that's the right way to react to something like that.
That's how I
okay.
handle
Right.
it. Yeah. And that's
Yeah.
a dangerous thing to
Got
teach
it.
them, you know, like that's where manipulation comes in. That's where I feel like manipulation is taught, you know, because you'll always hear, and that's what I've happened with tons of my friends I've found to be manipulators. Their parents are usually manipulators too, and it's their biggest issue with their parent is how manipulative their parent is. But then you watch their same actions. It's because that's how they've been taught to interact with the world. That's how they've been taught to get things. I need something, and I've seen that if I manipulate that person, I can get what I need. I'm gonna do that.
Exactly.
You know? I don't know another way.
And that's why a lot of the times people will say, well, it's all I know. It's all my family knows because it's all we've ever done.
Right.
And then at the end of the day,
back to those family trade
is that
secrets.
the excuse that you lean on, that you accept it as, oh, it's what has always been done. So there's no possible way anything else could be done. Or could you be that force that actually tries to do something differently?
That's where I've gotten a lot of kickback on that, because aggression is something in my family, like dominance, like instilling dominance by getting louder. Right, like by instilling dominance to get louder, you know what I mean? And like to the old primal thing of get louder and get big to instill your point. Like that's something
the
that
loudest is the one whose point is heard.
Right. And that's something that was instilled in me as a kid. And for one, it made me feel like I had no say as a kid because I was always the quietest one in the room. You know what I mean? Like, but as I became adult, I still see that so much in society, and I get into confrontations with people because I don't want to get into a yelling match. It doesn't make me feel good at all, because it reminds me of that as a kid and how I felt. So I try to go around that and, you know, sit down and have conversations, and I'm not good at it. I'm not perfect at always controlling my emotions and going into a conversation, but it's making that choice to do that instead of getting emotional and going into the shouting match, you know. And so many people are used to that. They don't know how to not do that, how to not argue without just yelling at each other. And these are full-grown adults, you know, who can't speak with their knowledge and information and battle with
and have a conversation without letting the emotions take over.
Right. It doesn't. Yeah. And it's usually when they run out of knowledge, when they run out of stuff to say, when they run out of actual words and value, it's just, okay, now I'm going to get loud. And then you see it every time.
And there was a time not too long ago that I had a conversation with my roommate about how I was trying to give him advice on how to not necessarily have to include swear words in, like, when he's like frustrated about something. I have, and I've noticed since we've had that conversation, he's definitely like scaled it down. What I've also noticed is that at times I subconsciously am doing the same thing. And it's almost like I'm looking at myself as being a hypocrite for telling him like he shouldn't be doing it, but then I turn around and do something of the same level, but I'm doing it subconsciously, and it's not something that I'm even thinking about doing, but because now we've had that conversation,
But
I'm thinking about it more, and now I'm noticing it
You
more.
catch yourself.
So I'm trying to almost backpedal myself, that I don't just want to be this person that swears like a sailor. Because I mean, granted, that's how like a lot of the figures that we grew up with all had potty mouths, all swore like a sailor. It doesn't necessarily mean that we have to be that same way.
Right. And
That's what goes back to what Crick was saying. It's unlearning, right? Unlearning behavior.
It is to a level of unlearning.
I want to say kudos on you too, because like that's a control and hypocrisy. That's a control and not preaching something that you can't hold yourself to. And that's I feel like a trait that not a lot of people have nowadays. Like people are so quick to judge others and tell each other how to live their lives, but they don't go back and look at how they're doing those same actions in their own. So I just want to say kudos to you on that. Like that's mature.
You learn some things as time goes on. And especially like I've seen points where like I've given someone advice on something, and then I've noticed that I turned around and did exactly the opposite of what I just gave that person the advice on. And I look at
the advice for the situation.
I look at myself in a mirror and as like, who are you and how do you, like, what right do you have that you feel like you can give this advice if you can't even follow it yourself?
You can't be too hard, because we talked about this before. Like it's a lesson. It's a lesson you're learning. You know the lesson, but you haven't yet mastered it. Like, you know what I mean? Like
preaching the lesson reiterates the lesson to yourself. If it makes sense to someone else, it makes sense to you.
Right.
Mm-hmm. It shows, yes, you do make sense. So now you have to start living that.
If you're going to go get into pottery and build a clay bowl, some instructor could show you, hey, this is physically how you make a clay bowl. And they could tell you this is how much clay you need and all this. You know what it takes to make a clay bowl. How long is it going to take you? How many attempts is it going to take you to make a good clay bowl? You know what I mean? You know how to do it. You know the whole process, but you need to learn it. You need to master it. You need to actually get the concept. So it's like, we can't be, the fact that you realize it is huge. You know what I mean? The fact that you realize those lessons is grand, and that you can actually like check yourself against them.
The fact that you realizing that you're a hypocrite, because I do the same thing, except I just write mine down in journals and never reread it. I wrote it down. It's good enough.
Maybe that's my problem.
And then B,
I don't write these things down, so they just stay as thoughts that just popcorn in my head.
We all have our medium. You shared yours with someone, so that made it memorable. But that's what it is, you know. And then when you do it and you catch yourself, that's your brain. Okay, click. The gears are turning. Okay, don't do that. I literally just said don't do that. I feel like a hypocrite. I'm gonna stop doing that. So next time you do it, maybe you stop right before you do it, and then next time it's like, why would that even pop in my head? And then all of a sudden it's not even a choice anymore. You know, you build yourself up. You train your brain.
That's where I feel like it's dealing with a big toddler. It's like, you know better. I know you know better, but you're continuing the same actions. And it's like, didn't we just talk about this like 5 minutes ago? We had this conversation and then you did it. And it's like, and it's where you can't be too hard. It's like, where none of us are perfect, but the fact, you know, it's training your brain those new habits. That's where it's like writing a note. Like if you're trying to learn something, you put a note in that room that just says one word that clicks into your mind every time. Oh yeah, that's right. Oh yeah, that's right. Like you have to reprogram that new habit in your brain.
I think that's the biggest part too, is you hit the nail on the head, is we're not perfect, but how many people act like they are perfect and their way is perfect, and there's no way that they would do it wrong.
For perfection.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, and I mean, striving for perfection's fine, but don't assume that your way is the end all. Don't assume perfection,
but no, you'll never make it there.
Don't dismiss what I'm doing. Yes.
Don't dismiss what I said. I'm sorry, but it's not.
Yes.
I think at a point, you come to realize and you come to accept that perfection is a metaphor. It is not physical and it is not possible, but it is what you strive, because at the end of the day, you want everything to be amazing. You want everything to be 125,000% perfection, infinity, whatever. You're going to work your best. And at the end of the day, you're going to have the result from putting in the most that you can put in. And whatever that result is, you accept that result. If it's a result that you didn't like, learn why it happened and from the reasons that you don't like it and how it won't happen for the future.
Right. Even if you perfect it to the point where you think it's close to perfect, someone else could look at it and say that needs a lot more, that needs a lot less. You know what I mean? Like, that's what we got to understand about that concept of perfection too. It's like, it is your own personal conception of perception.
Yes.
Of perfection.
It's your own perception.
Yeah. You know, it's like, what do you see as perfect? When are you happy? You know what I mean? That's what we got to really, it's like, when is it enough? When is everything enough? When is a project enough? You know, and you can't stifle it too much, because it's like, even with this podcast, you know, it's like, I don't want perfection, but I also want to give it enough of my effort where I feel that I am, you know what I mean? I'm not short selling myself.
It's because it's a responsibility that you feel towards yourself. That
I don't want to let myself down, or you guys, but like, also myself.
You physically feel invested to the level that you want to do as much as you possibly can, and you don't want to short sell. You don't want to be short sold. You don't want to walk away telling yourself, I didn't give it 100%. I didn't do as much as I could have. I could have done more.
And that's where I feel like I
if
realized
this fails, it fails at 100% power.
Exactly. And
absolutely,
I felt like I was, the reason a lot of my problems came from is like, I wasn't happy with my projects that I was doing, but I was also given my reason why I couldn't give them my full energy. You know what I mean? And like, I wasn't giving myself fully into things that I did. And it's like, that on its own is a depressing state where it's like, you're not reaching your own potential to yourself. You know what I mean? And like, for the roles,
it's like an apology with a butt.
Yeah,
a little bit. It almost goes back to, like, I think it was a couple episodes ago where you had asked if you feel like you are utilizing your time as best as you possibly can. And at the end of the day, we're all given X amount of time per day, and we have X responsibilities in that day. And at the end of the day, majority of those responsibilities, if they needed to be done, hopefully they are. And if it's the opposite, then that question you have to ask yourself is why.
Well,
exactly. You got more to write about, more questions to ask.
And then learn from that why.
Nothing got done. What can I do to do it? Exactly.
Learn from that why, so you're not asking why again.
I had this conversation with you the other day, Kev, about something I realized in myself. It's like, sometimes you start a project for your day, or you have like a list of projects for your day, and you go to attack them, and you accomplish maybe 2 out of the 5, but you accomplish 3 other tasks that you had to do to get some of the other tasks done. So it's like, you may not have got everything done on your list, but you got a lot more than you even planned on in the first place getting done, because you didn't know the full object at hand.
That's where you can't use that as the end all solve all, right? Like, that's your guiding line, your list. This is what I want to get done today. And then at the end of the day, you compare that to a new list of what you actually accomplish, because you may only check off 1 or 2 boxes from your list, but all of a sudden you've got 50 new boxes on your other list stacked up, all checked off already, because that's what it took to check off those 2 boxes.
That's where I think some of the responsibilities of roles, after you've lived them so long, just become second nature, to the fact that you forget that you're even doing them, because they're just expected of you, and you expect them of yourself. So you're expending that energy to fulfill this role that you don't even give yourself credit for anymore. But yet people still really value that role.
And it's what I'll tell people, like, and especially like going through like different training classes, like, we're going to do it once, twice, 3 times, and then it'll be second nature.
Right. It's just getting your routine. That's where you need, that's where it's
Mhm.
companies hold themselves responsible for their roles as management to give you that structure, to give you that, to give you your roles and dish them out appropriately and see people's potential and put them in the places that they need to be. Like, hold yourself responsible. You know what I mean? On every level.
Absolutely. They can give you the keys to the race car. They can put you on the racetrack. And then it's up to you to drive the car properly on that racetrack and not do a bunch of wicked donuts and spin it out into a wicked like fire spin.
You got to choose to be the driver. Are you a driver or are you just, you know what I mean? Like, what are you in that moment?
Exactly.
Okay.
You got to choose the roles that make you happy, right? You got to
Yeah.
choose the responsibilities that make you happy, and that will help you fall into the role that you want to do.
Do you,
Because if you're doing a role, if you're in a role that you're unhappy with, you are not going to perform well at your responsibilities.
right.
Realistically, if your
And
heart's
it's
in
not the
it,
role
if,
for
if
you.
your heart's
It's like,
not
is this
in
the
it,
right
your
person
heart's
for the
not
right
in it.
place? Or how Journeys used to say it was, is this the right person for this job? And is this the right job for this person? You know what I mean? Are we going to be
Mhm.
happy with them? Or are they going to be happy with us? And
Mhm.
that was something I was like, I never heard anything like that from a company before. That's huge.
I haven't necessarily heard it, but I've seen it a lot more.
Yeah.
And especially with a lot of these positions that literally anyone that knows how to type on a keyboard can do these positions. That all it is you're like, you're not an individual, you're a number.
Right.
If you're okay with that, you're okay with that. Play ball, work for that company for X amount is however long you need. If you're not okay with that, you're not okay with that. And that's up to you to do something
But if
about
you're
that,
not-
because they don't care
Exactly.
that you're not okay with that.
Right.
And if you're not okay with that, it doesn't give you the right to complain about it if you're not going to do anything to change that.
No, because no one's going to
Because the
listen.
choice is yours. It's your responsibility. Your happiness is your responsibility.
Right.
Your
And-
role is to find your happiness, what makes you happy.
And people argue that they're like, well, when you have responsibilities, you can't make certain decisions. And I say that when you have responsibilities, you know how to make certain decisions. Like
Yeah.
at the end of the day,
You kind of forced
father
to.
is going to hold a job to support their family. If they're in a position that they're unhappy, then utilize the time that you're not in that position to find a thing that you're happy doing. Like, don't at the end of the because of all the opportunity that we have available, don't feel like you're restricted to doing something and fulfilling a role that you don't want to fulfill.
And that's where though you have to,
There's plenty
that's
of
something
people to
ingrained
take
in
your
us.
spot.
But that's the thing though, is you have to unlearn that, because we're ingrained in society, you know, stay in your lane, do what you're taught. Like, it's, you can't change positions. You can't go change your mind halfway through your life when most adults already do. We get taught that you're pretty much set in your ways and you've created a path for yourself. And
You
it's not
better
true.
find
It's
out what
not
you
true.
want to
Some
do
pe-
because
some
You
life
can
is
do whatever
that's
the
coming.
the
fuck you
case.
Life
want to
is
do.
coming.
No, I think anybody, if you want, whoever the fuck you are, if you want to start doing something, you can change your situation. It might be hard. It might be harder for different people switching from one situation for another. But if you fucking want something enough, I think anybody can dedicate enough energy to, in some form, have that thing that they want.
I
In some
agree.
form.
Nothing in life has ever got easy.
100%.
Nothing in
No
life worth
matter
having.
what,
matter what it is.
even if you have restrictions, if you
Right.
put enough creative energy into overcoming your restriction,
Be
the
patient.
human
Patience is
brain
sometimes important
is
too.
a very powerful object and a very powerful tool.
Right.
And there
Like
are
7
people,
years. That's it.
there
7
are
years to
people
master
that
something.
don't have arms that use their feet in full capacity that they could use their hands.
Yep.
There are
Play
people
video
that
games
don't
and
have
everything
legs
else.
that can use their arms in almost full capacity that they could use their legs. Today's
Tell me
day
what I
and
can't
age,
do.
the technological advances, it's all mindset.
It is. That's I literally read this. This is the thing I was reading to you before. And it was about your mind. That is the battle. That is the battle you run into in every project that you have, is your mind. It's the biggest
Mhm.
battle. That's your arch enemy. That's the person who stops you in your tracks, because anybody else can throw stuff at you. And if you're passionate enough, you're going to do it no matter fucking what. But if you don't care enough, or if you don't make yourself care enough, then you're never going to do it no matter how much no matter how many like if everybody gives you everything that you need to do it, you're still not going to get it done unless you give a fuck. Like your mind is the biggest obstacle you will ever fight, in my opinion.
Hands down.
Absolutely. It comes down to understanding how to control our own minds and understanding that we do have that control to control our own minds. Because there's going to be people that they're like, oh, but there's some things that are just completely outside of your control. Control is just mindset.
Right. And sometimes it's not instant. You can't tell yourself to change your mind, and that's how it is. It's programming. You have to reprogram your mind, train it new, things that entertain it and activate it. And, it takes time. You're reprogramming 20 plus years. Yeah. Like you have to dedicate to yourself and give a fuck and want to change. And you have to care.
At the end of the day, you have to want it and you have to care.
Yeah.
So what we've learned is that responsibilities come with expectations. And with these expectations come the outline of how these roles are expected to be held and what is to be held with the person in these roles.
And are these roles as dictated as are the roles that we're given as ingrained as we think they are? Or do you have more influence controls over the responsibilities of the roles that you have? I fucked it all up. I don't even know what I'm saying, man. I'm just like literally talking gibberish.
I'm just like, wait a minute.
And if you're in a role that makes you unhappy, what reason do you have to stay there?
Okay. Are the roles that we're given as defined as we normally see them, or do we have more influence over them than we originally think? It's all right. Use my first one. It was a lot better. I'm not gonna.
Bowing out.
All right, we're good. We're good. We are good.
Discord. I'm gonna go smoke something about it.
All right.